Okay, welcome to part two of our Frazetta demonstration here. Me and the hound dog here are going to be your hosts as we make you our guests. If you remember last time, I began on a piece of watercolor paper like this. It's hot press, which means it's kind of smooth, right? But I really screwed it up. So I ended up washing it all off. Now, before I washed it all off, it looked like this. And the reason I washed it all off is because, well, I'll show you in a second when we move over to the actual drawing board here, okay? But Hound Dog agrees. We had a little discussion here, and we realized there's some problems with it, and I'll explain that in a second. So let's move over here, and I'll show you exactly what the problem is. So if we compare the dudes, the humble dudes, to the Frazetta here, you'll notice that this has a total look to it right here. I have too many little highlights going on, and that's not good. So what Frazetta has done is focus it where the strongest highlights are, and everything else kind of melts into the shadows. So as you can see, I got a little carried away with the render in there, okay? So that's no good. In the meantime, I thought I would start over, and that's what I've got so far. And I'm going to explain exactly how I do this and how I work, what the paint consistency that I work with, and all that stuff. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is open up my watercolor palette here. And as you can see, I've got my paints ready to go here. This is the transparent areas. This is the area where I add white to the paint so I can get an opaque effect. So essentially, this is what I do here to get the look down here. There's two ways you can go here with this kind of paint. One is you can go very, very transparent, and that's just straight paint without any white in it, and you get a watercolor effect. And if you want to add something like highlights, you have to go like this. Now, I'm not very good at doing straight transparent watercolor. In fact, I've never been able to do it like these hot shots on YouTube do. However, everyone's got their own way of doing things, for which I'm going to demonstrate right about now. So one of the first things I want to show you here is the advantages of paint that stays water soluble at all times. I added some color here to the shield, and I just put these down in what we called stage number 1, tiles. And tiles are what we call shapes of color and value. And these are all different color shapes and values, as the very astute among you out there pointed out last time we were here. The advantage of this paint is if you want to soften areas, you just take your brush, just so, not too much, not too little, and you can dissolve it. So this is your basic opaque watercolor or gouache effect that we're going for here. If you want to leave them intact, just straight out slashed in there, you can do that. If you want to soften the edges a little bit, you can do that too. Is it as easy as I'm making it look right now? No, because I screw it up all the time. Like, for example, you see this highlight right here. Let's zoom in there and let's take a look at what we got there with that highlight. If I think that highlight is a little too strong, well, I got a semi-wet brush, and I can just dissolve the paint a little bit. And when that dries, it's going to be far less intrusive than before. So let's get into it right here. Let's start with the helmet, okay? This is to show you how I do things here. So the first thing I'm going to do is get this like dark green mixture right here. I'm not going to worry about highlights because that's just too much work to try to figure those out ahead of time and go around them. And it's just not my style to do that. So let's just take an average an average color. In other words, what I call the base color, okay? And I'm just going to wash that in there. This is all transparent paint right here. And the opaque only comes with the highlights. If we move up here, we get virtual black. And unlike a lot of people, I don't use burnt umber and ultramarine blue to get black. I use black. Like the printing press? Hello? Okay, good. I'm glad that's completely understood. So let's just wash it in there, trying to be as careful as we can, which I never am. It really takes a copy of the Frazetta paintings to realize how incredible this guy's abilities are. I mean, he's got everything down. And there's a reason why he's renowned and he's known as the very best. There are guys that paint slicker than him, hide all the brush strokes, all that stuff. But fundamentally, this guy is untouchable. You remember the show, The Untouchables? Of course you do. I feel better already. Okay, so that's washed in. And now I'm going to get a smaller brush because I'm just that kind of a guy. Let's get a small brush. This is a King Art, the ones that took over from the my beloved Lowell Cornells that they don't make anymore because they were perfect. And I need something with some precision to it. So this paint dries pretty fast here, this washi paint. And so this is a build-up process right here. I don't like using small brushes, but I guess I'm forced to on those rare occasions. When I oil paint, I try to use the biggest hog bristle brush that I can find. So essentially, this is kind of where you need the detail stuff for stuff like this.
We have a question, it looks like it.
We have a question from where in the world is this residing?
Where? I don't know, but...
Where we don't know.
He was with our last live stream and he said, looking good, what do you think about Boris Vallejo?
Yeah, Vallejo. Very good, super.
I consider him the best old master style painter from the 80s onwards.
Boris Vallejo was a master. There's no doubt about that. His control over paint handling and everything that he does is A+. Now the Frazetta approach is a little different. Compare the two. Look for yourself to see exactly what the difference is. Boris has got this amazing brush control where it's virtually invisible, and it just looks like this beautiful, almost airbrush kind of a look to it. But his control over paint was intact in his mid-20s, and by the mid-70s, before that he had it down. And then from there on, he's just kind of wandered into this Muscle Man magazine kind of stuff. I prefer his older stuff where he actually did illustrations and told a story.
And he said he's from the UK.
The UK, okay, very good. Save some crumpets for me. Okay, so we got the tiny brush out again, as always. I think my hand's shaking a little bit. I just got back from the gym, and boy, are my arms tired. It's an amazing thing that we have this internet stuff. It certainly wasn't something I had growing up. For the better, I think. But imagine a time when anyone in the world can virtually write in, call in, and sound off. It's an amazing world, let me tell you. This thing is a little too a little too wide here, so I'm going to correct it. Remember yesterday I told you about painting is not painting, it's repainting. Well, that's pretty much what it is. It's just one adjustment after another. Now, if we get a close-up here of this helmet, you can see there's a lot of little things going on there, and it is astonishing. One of the things that I want to do before I get really started here is there are areas of this this part of the helmet that is lighter than the other ones. And it all depends on how the light is hitting it. So if you don't know light, you're not really going to know how to do this stuff. Let's grab a smaller brush. Now, one thing about this this opaque paint here method that I use is you're kind of going to want to use the paint pretty thick here. If you use it washy, it's gonna dry to a different value, lighter. And that, on occasion, drives me crazy. You put something down, it looks like it's exactly the right this or that, and then you find out that it's drawing much darker. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to put these so-called tiles in here, just straight, flat, without a lot of messing around here. And if I want to soften those, I can later on. Frazetta is the master of shapes. He's just incredible. He was also a funny guy. You know, he was an athlete. Frazetta was an athlete, and because he was an athlete, he was kind of restless, too restless to sit at the board all day like a lot of us do. I like sitting at the board all day, and I compensate by going to the gym. And trying to offset what happens when you don't go. So that's how I'm going to apply this right now so far. Now, Frazetta is also a master of, some people call it the broken color theory, which is it's not just one green here. There's a little bit of purple and there's a little bit of red in there and all that kind of stuff. Blue, purple, whatever. And that's just a way of, artists would call, what I call that is activating the area. If you just have one straight brown, like for skin color, and you don't add little shifts in there, it can look a little monotone. So that's how I'm going to start this right here. Now the next thing I'm going to do is get this skinny brush out again. Oh, I love my skinny brushes. And I'm going to very carefully look at how Frazetta's pattern is going on here. So we're going to need a pretty close-up view of this right here. Thankfully, we have a extremely expensive person behind the camera here who charges by the minute. So you can see what I'm trying to do here, right, people? Or of course you can. This is these are things that take time. Frazetta is famous for claiming he can block it in minutes. Well, fine. Let's just assume that not all of us can block it in minutes, but he's working at a frenetic pace here when he starts. He's very impatient. He just wants to get it blocked in. So this is what it looks like without a lot of noodling going on here. I'm going to reinforce the thickness of these whites right here by putting thicker paint on. Now you can always dissolve it, so there's no problem as far as shifting that. I'm going to shift it to a little bit of red here, and I think that's going to do what I call activating the area. I'm going to add a little bit of orange because it's green and orange are kind of opposites, right? So yeah. And remember, all these can be dissolved here. So that's essentially, it's basically done. And now it's just a matter of What is it a matter of, Steve? It's a matter of nuance. And there are a lot of nuances in a Frazetta painting. Make no mistake, my friends. You see how it's really white right around here? That's because the light is hitting it in this area, so it's gonna hit this side of this little design part here. And you know, he knows everything. There's nothing Frazetta does not know. And you know, he had his lifetime. I think he had like 80 some years on this earth to do what he wanted to do. And I'm always one to remind everyone that time is all we have in life. Time that continually marches forward. And if we waste it, we're in trouble.
We got someone from Brazil here.
Brazil, okay, all right. Time to conga. And what does this young person from Brazil have to say?
Oh, they just said, from Brazil here.
That's it?
Said, hi, great job. The person in armor is really impressive. And then from the conversation before about Boris.
Yeah.
The same person replied and said, his mermaid paintings in last year's calendar is as good as his early work.
I think it's a matter of subject matter. I happen to like, you know, instead of just a bunch of, you know, people swimming in the sea, I happen to like things that illustrate a story. And that involves multiple things, that involves storytelling, like bad guys, good guys, wolves, creatures, all that kind of stuff that he was really famous for. But I'm glad you like what he does. He's a, you know, Boris is a master after all. So you can see the little nuances that I'm putting in here. Frazetta worked in oil paint, of course. We all know that. And remember how the highlights actually work with this armor right here. Now, because there's a highlight that I have coming down here, this is where the light is really going to hit it. And these are all things you know when you start working with still lifes, believe it or not. Still lifes are what I learned starting back in the mid-'80s, are kind of the secret to understanding the things that you invent in fantasy paintings here. So you can see it still needs a stronger light. So that means I really have to punch up. I'm just going to go pure white, okay? And I'm going to put it on as thick as I can, because if it's not thick enough or not white enough, I can always dissolve it later on if it's not quite right. You can see I'm using a chisel tip brush right here. Everyone's got their preferences for brushes. There's another tile right there. I think I'm going to add one up here. So whoever's out there watching, the questions that you might want to ask me are technical questions or things like that. You know, things of the world has changed so much since I was growing up and going to art school in the 70s. If you wanted instruction, you had to go to a school, you had to go to a museum, and you had to buy books. Now, it's all changed. So let's take advantage of that. If you want to call in and give me your amazing thoughts on how you're doing with your life, your career, well, let's get it on. I think we need to hear from one of the Frazetta girls. I think that's a really good deal. I second that emotion. So here we go. Here's a lot of the little things here. I think this is where that phrase comes. It's as exciting as watching paint dry. So there's one of the teachers that I had, who was a teacher at the Art Students League in New York. He's the one that taught me about still lives in light. Light is everything, and it took me decades to understand light. A lot longer than I thought it would take. But I'm a slow learner, but I'm determined. So it was from his classes that I really started to, after taking 7 workshops from this person, it really made a difference here. This is where you get out the tiny brushes right here. I'm sure Frazetta, when he was doing his little details, had a brush no bigger than that. There. Okay. Little things, lots of little things. This is what takes the longest, I think, when you're painting, is these little things. And I remember my teacher called them invisible things, because you don't notice them. You're aware of them, and you see them, but the last thing you notice is those little ridges in his helmet here. And believe me, anyone who says this stuff can be just dashed off fast is lying. They take time. And if they're not done right, you know what I was going to tell you about that, you have to redo it. Wash it out, redo it, whatever you need to do. So from here on, I'm going to just model things a little bit. In Arizona, we keep hydrated with, what is this stuff called? Yerba. So now comes the little stuff. I'm not going to make this brush too wet. I'm going to make it just wet enough to soften the edges here. Now, if we get a really good close-up here from our ace camera person, we can see exactly what I'm talking about here. This thing has 4 corners to it, and I'm going to dissolve just enough to make it look like it's not something you just threw paint on, but something you actually modeled to make it look like it's actually on a metallic object. I'm going to soften some of these areas right here. I think I need to kind of knock them down. So I'm going to take some transparent paint here and just apply that over this area. It's very transparent. And you can see, look, that's how transparent it is. And I'm just going to go over some of these areas here very lightly, because if I go too hard, I'm going to obliterate what I put down, which happens a lot. Guys, see that? Can you guys see that pretty good? Good. Glad to hear it.
Someone asked, someone said, it's great to see you here live giving instructions. How do you feel about acrylic paints?
Boy, I get the tough ones. Acrylic paint, well, the only thing I can say about acrylic paint is that it was invented back in the 50s. It's plastic. It's pretty invulnerable. Flohar, do you agree? Wilted Ears says she's in favor of that. Can you raise your paw and say aye? Flo. Yeah. I think they've made improvements in acrylic paint over the decades. The acrylics that I used to use took 3 layers to get it opaque. Now I seem to be able to do it like with the Goldens or the Winsor Newtons. It just takes 1 coat to get an opaque passage. So that's really good news for us acrylic guys. More little things coming up here. Very washy, and I'm going to apply this over this area right here just to kind of localize the highlights and not spread them all over the place. One can never hope to match Frazetta, but we can always hope to try.
Walter White joined us in the live stream.
Walter White. Walter White's my editor on the Nexus books. Very invaluable guy to have.
He said, "Finally caught a live stream. Huzzah. Do you think art styles have become fragmented, or do you think there are still movements in art going forward? I had a teacher who said everything was devolving to fragmentism. Nobody was building on top of what came before anymore, in his view."
Well, that can only come from an academic. People that overthink stuff. I never think in terms of that stuff. I just think in terms of this is who I like, this is who influences me, and this is who I'm going to continue to learn from. So there's your simple answer right there.
Someone said, between Hal Foster and Alex Raymond, who do you prefer?
I prefer both of them for different reasons. Hal Foster was really the #1 master. Alex Raymond had a very cursive style based on his personality, and that's important to know. Your personality determines everything that you apply with a brush, pencil, or paint. Hal Foster was a very deliberate, used a #3 brush, probably no bigger than this, and just preferred a brush over a lot of stuff. Alex Raymond used a brush in the 40s and 50s, and then when he started to work on the Rip Kirby strips, he changed over to a pen. I thought that was great. He really loosened up a lot too, which I think is kind of commendable. Let's hear from somebody from Tasmania. Yeah. Anyone from Tasmania out there? Let's hear it.
Someone else said, Frank Frazetta is one of my all-time favorite artists and has always captured my imagination. And I want to thank you. I've recently discovered, I guess you can say you, and I've been reading yours and Mr. Barron's Nexus, and I'm loving it. And it has got me completely enthralled. Your art is amazing and just draws you into the wonderful stories you guys have come up with.
Well, that's always great to hear, because what I've always said about being an artist is, #1, you do it for yourself. #2, you send it out to the world, and you get feedback. So it's always nice to hear that. If somebody is if somebody's life is a little better from having read a particular artist's work, looked at the work and been inspired or been excited or just had a little better of a day, then that's reward enough. So thank you.
Got another question that says, have you seen some of the acrylic pouring art? It always looks like it might make great backgrounds for sci-fi art.
Pouring art, I assume that means where you put something in a cup and you pour it on the canvas. Sure, I've seen that kind of stuff. You know, this goes back to the artist's temperament. You know, what he, you know, art is something that comes from the inside. So if this guy has this need to express himself like that, then that's what you should be doing. That's what art is all about. Okay, so this helmet is let's get another close up there. I'm going to add a little bit of a dark to the underbelly of these patterns here, just to reinforce them a little bit. This is one of the few times I use a really small brush. Okay, so there's my helmet, guys. You want to see more? Okay, you talked me into it. Let's go up to, let's do the arm, okay? So we did the helmet. It's not quite there. In fact, I see something I can add to it right now. Let's get a nice big wad of white right here and give it this really strong, supply your own word, zing. So I'm going to take this size brush right here. I can use, really, I can use a bunch of different sizes here. Which one should I work with, guys? The skinny one, the chisel one, the big fat chisel one, or the bigger pointed one? Okay, I'm picking up some vibes. All right, you talked me into it. So remember what I did with the helmet? I'm going to do the same with this arm right here. So it's got a little bit of green, it's got a little bit of that, and I'm going to keep this paint very washy. And this is how I'm going to start. It's amazing what you can do with a big fat brush like this. Because you've got this chisel thing going on here, you're able to still get the the amount of control, but without using the really tiny brushes, which I call them sissy brushes. So if you don't want to be a sissy, don't use a tiny brush. Dare to expand yourself and work with something that's got some real meat to it right here. This is a 3/4 inch, yeah, flat chisel point. You can do a lot with that. So there's my arm right there. Transparent paint tends to dry a little lighter. Opaque paint, God bless it, dries a little darker. So if that's not confusing enough, send in your thoughts and I'll think about it. I feel a caller coming on here.
Let's see. Someone says,
Okay.
"Hello, my name is Casillo from Brazil.
Brazil, excellent, excellent.
I wanted to say that you, along with Frazetta, are two masters who inspired me when creating my artwork."
Well, that's very nice. Isn't that nice? Camera person agrees. Like I said earlier, that's really yeah, I remember Gary Larson from The Far Side saying, well, it's not like what I do cures cancer. Well, leave curing cancer to the cancer guys. We artists can do as much for people in their lives as anyone. If we can bring satisfaction to somebody, a smile to their face, a warm thought inside of them, then can you get any better than that? I say nay. So we're adding some darks in here. And there's going to be a lot of nuances here. Things that are actually kind of hard to explain. They're so nuanced that I hesitate to even explain them. But it's you know, painting, like I said earlier, is this back and forth, back and forth. And I never understood that when I was younger. I just thought, you know, well, it looks like kind of like magic, but how much of a magic thing is it? And eventually, if you read enough about how artists work, you realize that it's knowing your fundamentals. And the people that make it have to work hard because they like to work hard. I like to work hard. I've always liked it. I spend half my time studying as much as I do in actual work. I'm going to do a little trick right here that I've learned to use over the years. This is where I pick up paint on two different sides here, and I get kind of a transitional color there, and that's kind of what I want. Kind of.
Someone said, "Are you painting this as if it is a bronze statue or a real person using bronze paint coloration?"
I'm just copying Frazetta, guys. But that's actually a pretty good question. You know, I never thought about it. I'm too busy trying to copy them, measure up to the master here. So you see, you see what I'm doing here. I'm just adding little things and little touches and a little bit of this and a little bit of that. When I was younger, I floundered a lot because I didn't know what I was doing. What you have when you're younger is a lot of verve. Verve. Unskilled, untouched. Verve. Verve. V-U-R-V-E. V-U-R-V-E. Verve. Vesper, vesticle, vesper. Verb. Verve. Noun. Liveliness of imagination. Now there's a good one. What you want when you're young is a lot of verve. And if you don't have verve, you better know what you're doing. Which I did not when I was younger. But look, when you're young, it's you're in your late teens, 20s. I was a slow learner, late bloomer, but I worked hard, and I always liked working hard because that to me was fun. I was compulsive about what I did, and that can hardly hurt. There's an area right here that looks too much like a stripe, so I'm just gonna, like I said, what you can do with this paint, you can kind of dissolve it and get a softer edge right there. A little bit of that broken color stuff going on there. So this is the advantage of opaque paint. And it's different degrees of opacity. I've been working with the stuff since the cows came home, and it's still hard for me. Why is it hard, Steve? I don't know. It just is. Maybe someone out there can explain it to me. Okay, so little things here and there. See that? I just want to reinforce that area just a little bit more.
Someone said, will the art of comic book inking ever come back in print? I think it's one of the best books out there because it shows everyone's individual style.
Yeah, that's a good comment there. The Art of Inking by Gary Martin, who inked me for a long time on Nexus, is the author of the book. Yeah, these books are very valuable to everyone. With the advent of YouTube and all the actual demos that you can see on camera, this is something we used to have to send in and buy DVDs or tapes of. Now it's everywhere now. So the advantage of that is overwhelming. We've never had anything like this in the world until now. But as far as that book being reprinted, that's kind of up to Gary, I think. So we'll have to get Gary on the phone. Let's see. Let's get Gary on the phone. If I can actually learn how to use this thing right here. Well, look at that, Gary Martin. Let's see if Gary's home. Now, where is that guy calling from? The one that wanted to know about the inking book?
He didn't say where he was from. His name is...
Boy, some people just take forever to answer their phone. You know what I mean, guys?
Hi, this is Gary. Please leave a message and I'll call you right back.
Sure, they always say that. Gary, it's the dude here, and we're doing a live stream. We got a guy from Tasmania that wants to know if we're going to reprint the Art of Inking book. So, as soon as you know the answer, tell us and I'll tell him. It's time for that sparkling drop of Schwab of Essence.
The person who asked the question said, "Haha, that's great. That you called him Gary." Oh, and he said he's from Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C., okay. Excellent. So we're going to add, let's go back to this arm right here. There's a little bit of, remember I said Frazetta's into this color thing right here. So it's never one straight color. It's always a little bit of this and a little bit of that. His shadows are kind of purple, actually. So let's add some, it's a dark color, obviously, but it's not pure black. It's close to that. So now, this is the essence of the arm right here. Now from here, it's just a matter of a lot of little things. Let's keep the paint wet here. Let's spray it like that. I'm going to soften this edge right here because it just means that instead of being a very straight, flat thing, it's got a lot of roundness to it. So it's going to be a softer, curving edge to it.
A comment that says, "Dude fan from Boston area."
Boston, all right. Most expensive place I've ever visited. I'm sure he agrees. I was in Boston long ago, and it was a good time. I remember going to the museum. What was the name of that lady? I can't think of her name right now. Fanny Garver? No, something like that. But anyway, there was a lot of Sargent watercolors there. And of course, we all got pretty excited about that. I think I touched one of them, got in trouble. I'm required to touch every painting that I see when I go to a museum, so I can say I did it. So I did it. Now we're going to add some lights on top of this here. So now is where we have to get out the opaque paint right here, which is just another name for paint with white added to it. So it's got a body to it. Now watch here. We're going to get the lights coming back here. Again, Frazetta was just alarmingly perfect with this kind of stuff. I mean, the guy knew everything. So if we endeavor to learn everything, then we're going to be at least in good hands here. Now there's a plane chain, see, with the arm right there. It's not straight like this. It bends over, so it's grabbing that spear. So we want to make sure that's obvious. Okay, so I think if I add this color to it and do a very careful job. Now, right down there, you see that's a very sharp edge, and that's because it's the elbow. Elbows are sharp. So, repainting. How's Flowhard doing down there? Oh, Flowhard's doing fine. She's doing her hound dog thing. Can you believe that Gary Martin wasn't around? Boy, he better not be taking a nap.
Someone's asking, what's one of the best comics that you've ever loved?
Oh, another tough one. Okay. I was born in 1956 at the last day of the year, New Year's Eve. So that makes me in my 60s right now. And I fought for every second of it, believe me. The comics that were around back then were the 1960 Marvel comics, and if anyone's not aware of this, everything that Marvel ever did from then on is based on that first decade from 1960 to 1970, when Kirby, Stan Lee, and various other people were involved in creating the Marvel Universe. And that's the era that I grew up in. So you take anything from that time period and you'll see what I like and what influenced me. A little bit of a highlight here. This is obviously a reflective material here, because if it wasn't, it wouldn't have this highlight to it. And he's got a little bit of a light going on there. So we're going to wrap up this arm right here, and then we're gonna say auf Wiedersehen, which is Tasmania for see you later. You see what I'm doing there, guys? Now we need to punch that white up a little bit, so we're not going to mess around here. We're just going to go pure white and put it on kind of thick, because otherwise it just won't work right. And that's the nature of opaque watercolor, or gouache, the ugliest word I've ever heard in my life. I think we need to change the pronunciation, or just the word itself, gouache. How about gouache? That's true. Yeah, I think that's much better. It's just too ugly a word. I think it's, even worse, it's Italian for mud. For shame. I'm going to add just a little bit of the little bittiest thing going on here. I'm going to do a little softening here of that area. And then I'm going to put the details on top of that. I'm not going to put them in first. I'm going to put them on top of this. So get the form done right first, and then worry about the little things. So the adage that I've learned to work from, and everyone else that I've learned from, is big to the little, the big stuff to the simple, to the small stuff. And that's how it works with Frazetta, with pretty much anyone you've ever met. Now this is just going to require some noodling here. So let's take a look at what he's got here for the pattern. I still haven't heard from Tasmania yet. I really want to hear if I can't hear from anyone from Tasmania, let's hear from a couple wombats. Isn't that a Baron character? Yes, it is. The wombat, yeah. Or some echidnas. We don't want to involve kangaroos because they're mean and they box and they hurt blowhards. All right. Okay, so you see those little designs we have there? Now we have to go in there and render. My favorite word, render. And all that means is you just got to add a little. You got to add the little things that make it look like it's got an actual raised area to it. I still can't believe Gary Martin didn't answer the phone. It's pathetic. So a little bit at a time, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. My hand is still not quite there from the exercise that I did earlier. Now, if any of this is a little too strong, remember you can dissolve it, all right? You can take a big brush or a little brush. Oh, I want to add some more highlights to that. A little bit of water, a lot of paint, and I'm going to go in between here. Is that going to work? You guys tell me. You guys tell me if that's going to work. Okay, it's going to work. Now I want to make sure that paint dries first before I go in there and think I have to modify it. But since I'm impatient, I'm not going to wait.
Someone's asking, have you ever read Barron's New Nexus?
Have I read Barron's New Nexus? I've read The Monster Hunt. And I think that's it. Barron did a